Joel Arnold with Foundation Baptist College. This is the class Elementary Greek, and we're continuing now with chapter 13 in Plummer and Merkel's beginning with New Testament Greek. This chapter is on liquid verbs. So one of the things I mentioned in the previous lecture is that we have a series of chapters here that are kind of built around seeing how the patterns we learned don't always accrue. And last lecture, we talked about the second aorist. In the second aorist forms, rather than the way that we initially learned how to do the first aorist, putting in the sigma alphas throughout, we learned with the second aorist there are places where instead we'll actually change the stem. We'll omit the sigma alpha, and so instead of elusa, as we have worked on, instead I'll end up with elabon. The sigma alpha is just vanished. And that's to recognize that there are these kind of exceptional situations, verbs that work a little differently. Well, that's what we're continuing on now with the liquid verbs. And in the case of the liquid verbs, what we have here is a conflict between, it's kind of a morphological conflict in how words get put together. With verbs like minnow, a verb that ends in certain letters, okay, these certain letters that come through are going to clash in formation once I start to try to put, my verb is minnow, once I try to put on any of the sigma endings, something like minso, I've got a bit of a conflict just in how humans say or communicate sounds right there between the nu and the sigma. And that conflict, something's got to happen. Okay, now let me pause here for a quick second to explain just some of the dynamics in this. Languages are funny like this. Spoken language precedes written in the sense that the way we say something and what works for us, what's comfortable in what rolls off our tongues, then becomes part of the way we speak to each other. Later, when we try to write down what we're doing, then you get these spelling differences. And a good example of this in English, let's take the word, well, first let's talk about our plural formation. So cat, cats, dog, dogs. So I have plenty of words where I just put the normal stem, cat, put an S on it, cats, and I'm out. Okay, but what about house? Houses, church, churches. And what happened there is I had a bit of a similar conflict, what I've just been talking about a moment ago, between the ways that the sounds are going together. By the time I get this consonantal cluster, church, you say, like, sounds fine to me, I'm putting just an S on it. No, actually what you end up doing is putting an E in between before you continue on with your S. And that's because it would be really hard actually to say like church, 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 church. It doesn't work. Not like dogs, cats, church. You put an E in between to make this pronounceable, churches. Okay, now here I'm going to step out into a zone that I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I had a conversation with a friend years ago who was bilingual in English, Japanese, and in his discussion about Japanese and how this works, he talked about breaking up syllables. That a Japanese speaker would find it difficult to have consonantal clusters. And so they might do something like, the example he gave was McDonald's, and they might break it up into something like Macadonaldo. And you put in Macadonaldo, you put in sounds to make it work. Tagalog, which I did have the chance to learn, has trouble with consonantal clusters at the front of a word. And so instead of saying straw or stoplight, you'll hear people say straw, straw, stoplight. It's harder to get the sound going without the vowel. Okay, those kind of dynamics in how we say things or how we prefer to say things or what we feel comfortable with when we put sounds together, that's a pattern with languages, and it is so also with Greek. Specifically, as I've said now, the conflict between sigmas and liquid consonants. Okay, now I have to, before I go on, tell you what the liquid consonants are. So these four consonants, lambda, mu, nu, and rho, are each liquid consonants. And just for your benefit in memorizing them, years ago I came up with my own mnemonic. So I just went through and I put in vowels here. And so I'll come out with leminer, as in I made some lemonade, but my brother made his own lemonade. And his lemonade was leminer, or more leminer, a lot more leminer than my lemonade. Dumb word, you know, but it worked for me and it stuck. And the consonants in that word then, lambda, mu, nu, rho, those are liquid consonants. It even works because once you do lemonade, now it's liquid, sort of sticks in the mind, I suppose. Your laminar consonants, your liquid consonants, if they appear in this spot, got to clear out some of the goo here, it's getting bad. If they appear in this spot right at the end of the stem, or properly, let's go back to the way it would be written in vocabulary form, minnow, right before the ending, I've got this last letter of the stem. If that is a liquid consonant, then once I try to attach sigmas into this spot, we're going to have conflicts. Try this for an exercise for yourself. Pause for a second. And I want you to just think for a second or two about the verb tenses that we've learned to this point. I'll even put the verb tense chart up for you so that you can compare. But the verb tenses we've learned are everything except for the present, or except for the perfect. So these four we've learned. Look down or think through how we form each one of those and where would I have contact between the ending and a sigma. Okay, there are two spots. Go through mentally. Where would I find contact, direct contact, ending, directly followed by a sigma? And the two spots you're going to hit that are going to be the future, active and middle, and the aorist, active and middle. Reason for that is if you think of both of those spots, I've given you some grammatical markers that I encourage you to remember. And the grammatical markers that I suggested for those two spots were that the sigma is the sign of the future, and the sigma alpha is a sign of the aorist. Okay, so with that recognition then, I'm looking at this spot right here, sigma future, sigma alpha aorist. And in both of those cases, I'm going to have something like, if I'm trying to do minnow, I would have a theoretical minso. Or if I was trying to do the aorist, I would have a theoretical epsilon augment min sigma alpha. And the problem we would be encountering would be right here and right here. Will the nu and the sigma be able to combine? Are we going to be okay here? And the answer is, well, no. So what happens in those spots? And the simple answer is that the sigma can't stand next to the liquid letter, and so the sigma will evaporate. You'll discover in these forms that the sigma is simply missing. Okay, I'm giving you the liquid future and the liquid aorist. Take a second, look over the chart, and just mentally compare what I think I should be seeing in these spots. Compare that to what I'm actually seeing in these spots. And I do think if you look across it, you'll come to the conclusion of what I said. The sigma has essentially evaporated, but not just. In order to get this into our heads, let's go take a quick review at the liquid future, or excuse me, the regular future and the regular aorist. I'll start with the regular future. The way that we formed the regular future before was that we just had stem plus sigma plus ending, luso, luces, luce, lusamen, luceto, lususi, and so forth. If I'm going over to my liquid futures, I'll see that my forms here have that sigma missing, but not only just that. Particularly, take a quick look at this spot right here, and you'll see that a little more than that happened. You can take a second, try to evaluate or guess, and come up with a theory what is happening there. I should probably draw this a little better. This is right here, not a sigma, it's actually an omicron. So we're looking at min, umin. And in that spot then, what's happening? And the answer is, well, the theoretical sigma, I mean, the sigma never occurs that way, but let's go to a smaller size here. This will never appear, but theoretically, I had men sigma plus amen. Okay, this theoretical sigma right here, when it vaporized, what it actually transformed into, again, morphological, think of it as converting into an epsilon. The sigma transformed into an epsilon. And you can see that if that happened, I would end up with, right here, a theoretical, again, min epsilon omicron. That epsilon omicron, as you've learned, is going to go into an omicron upsilon, contract vowel rules, and I'll end up with min numen. Similar things happen down here with mineta. Epsilon iota, those two forms have combined, and the two combined forms now are giving us epsilon iota, contract vowel rules. Plummer helpfully says you can think of minnow in the future kind of like it's an epsilon contract verb, like poieo, and those combinations would happen like that. Now, as I've said, it's entirely understandable if you hear all of those details and your head's swimming a bit and you're frustrated. Like, really? I was just trying to get my head wrapped around the future. I was just trying to wrap my head around contract verbs. And now we have this weird liquid verb form. What's happening? And if I can give you some encouragement here, these are not happening a ton. They're more like a trick that happens. I think more often I just see students reading along. Minnow is a big one. Crino is another one. And they read it as a present, and they're missing one little detail. And if you can get this detail, actually, I can make this lesson go a lot better for you. Rather than having to redo all that contract verb configuration, here is, I think, the simple, quick and dirty, just get it done way of handling these liquid futures. And the thing that you want to watch for throughout, keep your eye open for, wait for it, keep your eye open for the circumflex. Circumflex here, minno, minnes, minne, minumen, mineta, minusi. Okay, now there are going to come later discussions when we work with the subjunctive where that circumflex will also matter. It's something there too that can help you out. I'm not expecting, as you would, for instance, be needing to reproduce this chart so much as you just have to be aware of it. Watch it when you're out there in the wild and you encounter this form. That circumflex will make the difference. So if I wrote the present tense form of this, what it would look like would be minnow. The difference is, in this case, actually the accent mark. And that accent mark then is your key. Pay attention to the circumflex. When you see a verb that is a liquid verb, it ends in one of those laminar consonants, watch for your accent mark. And eventually your brain, especially minnow and crino, those are your big ones. There are derivatives. Apokrinomai is a form taken from crino. But especially those forms, watch for those forms, and you'll see it. A similar thing's going to happen over here with the liquid aorist. Okay, so the nice thing about minnow is we can do both of these. We can kind of see the dynamic. What happened over here? Well, I had that same theoretical conflict going on between the minnow liquid letter here and the sigma alpha. Mensa, if you're immediately thinking of an association. Yeah, something like that. So I have this conflict between those two letters standing against each other. The sigma will, I said earlier, vaporize. Probably cleaner to think of it as, again, sort of turning into an epsilon. But in this case, it's just that epsilon would be absorbed into the following letter. I suppose that could take you astray if right here you were imagining that epsilon combining with the epsilon ending. If you thought of that as an ending, maybe it could create a conflict. This is one of those points where language is not math. But in any case, the sigma has more or less vaporized. Well, then how am I going to keep track of this? One of the keys, and this will remind you now of the second aorist, one of your keys is stem change. The actual expected stem is minnow, as in mu epsilon nu. The iota is the thing that stepped in there, and that iota has kind of represented for us some kind of stem change has happened, and the absence of the sigma. I still have the alpha, but I still put this together as aorist. Okay, comfort for the frustrated at this point. You can recognize that when you come to this form, I don't need you to write this form from memory. In fact, for a decent number of the liquid aorists, I couldn't just sit down and write them out. I don't waste or use the brain space to remember how all of those verbs work. What I need to do is recognize them in the Greek text, so that as I see the Greek text, I'm not thrown by this. I'm not unfamiliar and confused about what on earth this thing is. And for that, I would suggest, well, that's kind of a lower bar and a very doable thing. Because I would suggest when you come along and you encounter this kind of format in the Greek text, or one of these configurations, the first thing that ought to hit you would be, aha, augment, sign of the past time, indicative. So you already are off on that track. You look towards the end and you see an alpha or an alpha sigma or one of these alpha forms, and what should then click in your brain is, well, I'm seeing the alpha and I feel like it should be an aorist, but where's my sigma alpha? And at that point, what ought to go off is, aha, liquid letter, that thing. And as long as your brain can just process down that track, you'll be okay. Okay, start off with the augment. I'm always going to encourage you when we get there, watch for the augment. As soon as you see the augment, you're straight down the track. It's either imperfect indicative or aorist indicative. It has to be one of those past time indicatives. And from there, then you're looking at the ending, trying to figure out which one it is. The imperfect with an alpha, that's not making sense. I'm confused. Aha, liquid letter. You should be fine. And with those two forms, then great. You should be on track to be able to handle what's going on with the liquids. Let me show you, because the part of the complexity with these is that not every verb form works exactly the same. That's why I wouldn't encourage you to slavishly memorize and reproduce the chart I just gave you. Those are example charts, see, but each verb's a little different. And so your actual key here is knowing the liquid letters. That's your memory. Your memory work for this lesson. Know the liquid letters, lambda, mu, nu, rho, laminar. Know that system, those four letters, and then recognize or remember the rule that one of those four letters on the end of the stem plus a sigma creates a conflict, and the sigma is either going to turn into an epsilon, basically turn into an epsilon or vanish. Okay, and if that actually works itself out in implementation, here are the verbs that we have. Okay, I've put these in a bit of a pattern. This is derived from Plummer, but I made a couple of adjustments to it because there's a bit of progression here, and some of these are, there are some patterns. So the first off is kreno, and kreno is a perfect test case because the vocabulary form, like that's just our standard form. When I go to the future, the only difference is circumflex. Okay, I just taught you that. And when I go to the aorist form, my only difference, the stem didn't change, nothing like that happened. The sigma is dropped out. And so I should be expecting ekrensa. I didn't get the sigma, and so I have augment, stem, no sigma, alpha. That's it. And if I look at that form then, all right, my key would be to remember right here, oh, liquid letter. So I'm probably, you know, how else can I explain the alpha? It seems like it should be, it's got to be either imperfect or aorist because I have an augment. That alpha, where did it come from? Where's my sigma? Aha, liquid letter. Okay, that's, I think, my most straightforward liquid verb. Apokrinomai is just a form of that. So the difference between these two is that I've just put the preposition on the top, and over here it's augmented. Otherwise, I mean, that actually follows the rules exactly, and I'm not at all surprised. So this is really not a verb to memorize or anything. It's the same as the one before it. Okay, the next group has some similarity, and that would be for each of, down through the first three of these. These three work very similarly. The pattern being that I've got a stem, apactane, apactane, apactane. I've got a stem, and sorry, a little crash there. But I've got a stem where the epsilon iota that starts at the beginning has been replaced in the middle so that the future just has the iota missing. So apactane goes to apacten. And that's actually preserved in the aorist. So apactane here is preserved apactane over there, but dropped in the future. Okay, agero, epsilon iota, goes to agero. It's maintained over here. I still get agera in the aorist. Okay, but yeah, on the vocabulary form, epsilon iota is preserved in the aorist, but it's dropped in the future. Spero, dropped in the future. Okay, so I have at least that pattern. Here, very similar with iro, I've got an alpha iota that's dropped. The iota is dropped. The difference here is, in this case, that iota is also dropped in the aorist. And so that set, I think, is similar. Minnow works the opposite way. Minnow, preserved into the future, I gain a iota in the aorist. Okay, so what I would say about the second set, or this group right here, if you're looking for a pattern, this group right here, I've got some kind of diphthong, alpha iota, epsilon iota diphthong, and it's that's changing across them. Okay, and my simple answer for you for these ones, I don't need you to memorize, actually please don't, try to memorize which one does which. If you can just get used to the pattern that sometimes the iotas across the present, the future, the aorist, sometimes those iotas will drop in and out. That's your key, okay? And paying attention to your liquid letters, your liminar letters, and then don't be surprised if a iota drops out. Don't be surprised if a sigma is missing. The pattern I taught you earlier about the future continues to be your key. Your key for all of that goes, watch for the circumflex, and you'll notice here, all of these futures have the circumflex. Just pay attention to the circumflex and your life will be fine. That's all you need to worry about. Okay, so that's enough with that. And my last set is that the pattern down here, these last two, have a pattern with a stem, apangelo and apostello, where the double lambda here drop to a single lambda there. And a single lambda here matched by an eta iota, or epsilon iota here. Okay, so double lambdas go to single lambdas, and in the aorist, I also get an epsilon iota, which kind of reminds me of like meno and mena. Okay, again, I'm not stressed that you memorize these. I just want to point out some patterns, and then your expectation is don't be stressed out when a sigma goes missing. And also be conscious of your core letters, laminar, lambda, mu, nu, rho. If you get those two truths or those two ideas, memorize these letters. Don't be surprised when the sigma goes missing. And, oh, and I'll add one more. Sweat the circumflex. If you see that liquid letter and you see a circumflex, liquid future. That alone is probably the biggest thing that I need students to know. And if students can be conscious of the liquid letters and then watch that circumflex, catch it when it goes by you, so it doesn't surprise you or trick you, you'll have these liquid verbs mastered. That's it for this lesson. It ought to be a breather. It ought to be an opportunity to just kind of step back, memorize a little bit, 4 letters and a rule or two. And then from there, it's just a matter of getting used to, especially crino and minnow. And otherwise, this is a pretty manageable grammatical phenomenon. That's it for now. When we continue next time, we'll continue to third declension nouns.